ثلاث اشهر حلت تحلى 13.
Good afternoon. You're watching the English newscast on Future Television. I'm Lynn Tamim, and these are today's headlines. Lebanese lawmakers failed to elect a new head of state in a 30th parliamentary session. The airplane containing the corpses of the Safwan family reaches Beirut's international airport. And Syrian President Bashar al-Assad meets with Russian President Vladimir Putin in Moscow. The airplane containing the corpses of the Safwan family has reached Beirut's international airport. The 7 victims who died after their migrant boat carrying them from Turkey to Greece sank in the Aegean Sea last week were received in the presence of representatives of Prime Minister Tamam Slam and Parliament Speaker Nabih Berri. Turkish authorities have promised to keep looking for 2 other Safwan members who are still missing from last Wednesday's accident. Major General Mohammad Khair, Secretary General of the Higher Defense Council, has urged the Lebanese not to deal with immigration mafias after offering condolences to the Safwan family in Uzai, south of Beirut. Lebanese lawmakers have failed in a 30th session to elect a new head of state after a nearly year-and-a-half-long presidential vacancy. Parliament Speaker Nabih Berri set the next presidential election session to November 11th, as lawmakers from the March 8th coalition upheld their boycott of the vote. The failure to elect a successor to Michel Sleiman has plunged the country into a presidential impasse that has paralyzed parliament and threatens to collapse the cabinet. Following today's session, Future Bloc leader MP Fuad Sanyura has warned that the failure to elect a president was leading Lebanon towards further disintegration, especially on the economic level, and those obstructing the elections were responsible for the current state of affairs in Lebanon. He said electing a head of state was key to reaching a solution to major problems in the country, which needs a president who represents all Lebanese communities. Construction works preparing the Srar landfill in northern Akkad district have been halted after protesters and several students held a sit-in protesting the move. The national news agency said a number of campaigners erected tents in Akkad's area of Al-Abudiyeh, and school students held a sit-in the area to halt the works of bulldozers amid heavy security presence. The security forces, who have worked under the supervision of Lieutenant Colonel Mustafa Al-Ayubi, along with other senior officers, put an end to the dispute that erupted between the residents and the workers. The protesters reject government plans to set up a sanitary landfill in the town of Srar. The UN has marked the 70th anniversary of its presence in Lebanon. Here's a statement from the UN Special Coordinator for Lebanon, Ms. Sigrid Kaag.
Lebanon was there at the founding of the United Nations. Lebanon's important, prominent people, politicians, Lebanon citizens already had that vision of human rights, equality, shared humanity, and prosperity for all. But we live in a very difficult era, as you know better than anyone. Volatility in the region is forcing people to be displaced, to seek shelter elsewhere, and Lebanon has so generously hosted more than 1.2 million registered Syrian refugees over and above the 400,000 Palestinian refugees and others. It is a tremendous burden that you primarily front and continue to shoulder, and again we'd like to pay homage to that. You are a beacon of hope for those who come to you. Other countries where common heritage is systematically destroyed, cultural treasures, actually mankind is the very target of an effort of destruction. We're witnessing today, collectively, the largest global displacement of people since World War II, and as you know, most of these are Syrian. The impact of the conflict in the Middle East is a stark reminder of the urgent need to deal with the root causes of human tragedy. Political settlements to conflicts, such as those in Syria, Yemen, but also the question of Palestine, are imperative. Where does Lebanon go from here? We know that you've successfully managed to navigate the tide. It is often touted or referenced as resilience. I always like to be a little bit more cautious. I think the Lebanese are phenomenally resilient, but we should never take your resilience for granted. Hence, we should do more.
The Beirut Institute Summit has taken place in Abu Dhabi earlier this month under the theme Reconfiguring the Arab Region and its Global Space Beyond Political Economy and Security Threats. The summit hosted political leaders, senior policy makers, prominent thinkers, major CEOs, and civil society leaders. FutureTV correspondent Shahir Dries was on site and brought us an exclusive interview with UN Undersecretary General for Humanitarian Affairs and Emergency Relief Coordinator Ms. Valerie Amos regarding the political situation in Lebanon and the refugee crisis. Have a listen.
Well, of course, over the years, we've all been extremely concerned that the wave of refugees coming in from Syria into Lebanon has had a significant impact, not just on the economy, but also on the very fragile relationships between communities in Lebanon. It's also important, I think, that we recognize that for continuing stability in Lebanon, we need to make sure that there is adequate protection of the rights of refugees. We need to balance those two things and to ensure that the communities in Lebanon, the host communities, who are really bearing the brunt of looking after this refugee flow, that they are also supported. So when I was at the United Nations, and I know that this work continues, we worked very hard to raise the awareness of the international community of the importance of giving the Lebanese government and the Lebanese people the recognition and the support for what they're doing. The importance, of course, of a political solution to the crisis in Syria. And as the years go on, we're now seeing that spillover, not just from within the region in terms of Lebanon, Jordan, Turkey, Iraq and elsewhere. We're seeing the spillover into Europe and increased focus on these matters. But I very much hope that the reality of the situation in Lebanon is recognized by the international community.
How do you see the political issue in Lebanon?
Well, of course, you know, Lebanon is a country which for the last year there has not been a president. There's the ongoing discussion between the parties to try to resolve that. I hope it is resolved quickly. And of course, we all have a huge concern, particularly on health grounds, of the current issue with respect to the collection of refuse.
Syrian President Bashar al-Assad flew into Moscow for a meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin in what is believed to be his first trip abroad since the start of the war in 2011. A Kremlin spokesman said that leaders discussed their joint military campaign against rebels in Syria, calling the meeting a working visit. The Syrian presidency confirmed that Assad and Putin held 3 meetings in which Russia's Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov and Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu were present. After the meetings, Putin said he was hopeful that a solution may be reached for the war in Syria, where Russia has been carrying out airstrikes since the end of September. And coming up next, the Vatican denies reports that Pope Francis has a benign brain tumor. More details after the break. Welcome back. UN Chief Ban Ki-moon has urged an end to spiraling violence as he met with Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas in Ramallah, saying all recent killings must be thoroughly investigated. Ban's visit was aimed at calming 3 weeks of deadly unrest in which 50 Palestinians and 8 Israelis were killed across Israel and the Palestinian territories. Ban, who met Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu on Tuesday, said the only way to end the violence is through real and visible progress toward a political solution, including an end of the occupation.
Today, I'd like to speak directly to the peoples of Israel and Palestine about the dangerous escalation in violence across the occupied Palestinian territory and Israel, especially in Jerusalem. I am dismayed, as we all should be, when I see young people, children, picking up weapons and seeking to kill. Let me be clear. Violence will only undermine the legitimate Palestinian aspirations for statehood and the longing of Israelis for security. I urge the youth of Palestine, as the future of your people and society, to turn your frustration into a strong but peaceful voice for change. Demand that your leaders act responsibly to protect your future. Demand progress for a political solution from your leaders, from Israeli leaders, and from the international community. I'm not asking you to be passive, but you must put down the weapons of despair. There is no so-called security solution. You, the people of Israel, as much as the Palestinian people, need to see a political horizon to break this cycle of violence and fear.
Iran's Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei has approved the nuclear deal between Tehran and world powers and ordered it to be implemented subject to certain conditions. In a letter to President Hassan Rouhani, Iran's highest authority reportedly said the United States and the European Union should clearly announce the elimination of sanctions against Iran and warned that the deal had several structural weak points. The Vatican has denied an Italian media report that Pope Francis has a benign brain tumor. Spokesman Father Federico Lombardi said in a statement that the Pope is carrying out his activity with his usual high-level intensity, and spreading unfounded news is gravely irresponsible and is not worthy of attention. Francis later held his weekly general audience before tens of thousands of people in St. Peter's Square and was due to return to a 3-week gathering of Roman Catholic bishops from around the world, which he has been attending daily. Chinese President Xi Jinping has addressed British politicians in London during a 4-day visit in which more than $46 billion of trade and investment deals are expected to be signed. The two countries are expected to cooperate on major infrastructure projects, ranging from building high-speed rail links to developing nuclear power stations, which would create thousands of new jobs. The expected flagship deal is a plan for two state-owned Chinese utilities to invest in $25 billion nuclear project being built by French utility EDF at Hinkley Point in southwest England. Britain rolled out the red carpet for Xi, who was welcomed with a 41-gun salute and given a ride in a gilded carriage with Queen Elizabeth before given the rare honor of addressing politicians from both houses of Parliament. Canada's Prime Minister-elect Justin Trudeau said he told U.S. President Barack Obama that Canadian fighter jets would withdraw from fighting the Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant group without giving a timeline. Trudeau, who had promised to withdraw Canada from combat in the coalition fight against ISIL, said he told Obama that Canada will pull out of the bombing mission but maintain humanitarian aid and training. The White House had earlier said it hoped the new Canadian government would continue to support the efforts of the U.S.-led coalition to fight ISIL. Canada last year deployed CF-18 fighter jets to the region until March of 2016, as well as about 70 Special Forces troops to train Kurds in northern Iraq. This marks the end of our bulletin for today. Now for a reminder of our headlines. Lebanese lawmakers failed to elect a new head of state in a 30th parliamentary session. The airplane containing the corpses of the Safwan family reaches Beirut's international airport. And Syrian President Bashar al-Assad meets with Russian President Vladimir Putin in Moscow. Those are your top stories for today. I'm Linda Tanim, and I thank you all for tuning in this afternoon. Take care.
سنة و3 أشهر حلت تحلط الوسطى